The calendar, How Luisa Received the Gift, from the Book of Heaven Volume 1, by Luisa Piccarreta. Part 5. Who can tell how frightened I was at such an announcement? I felt my blood freeze, my hair curl, my imagination full of black ghosts that seemed to want to devour me alive. It seemed to me that, before putting me in that painful state, the Lord gave freedom to everything I was to suffer, and I saw myself surrounded by all this. So I turned to him and said, Lord, have pity on me. Oh please, do not leave me alone and abandoned. I see that the rage of the demons is such that they will leave not even the dust of myself. How shall I be able to resist them? My misery is well known to you, and also how bad I am. Therefore, give me new grace that I may not offend you. My Lord, the pain that most torments my soul is to see that you too must leave me. Ah! To whom shall I say a word any more? Who will teach me? However, may your will be always done. I bless your holy will. And he, benignly, continued to say, Do not afflict yourself so much. Know that I will never allow them to tempt you beyond your strengths. If I allow this, it is for your good. I never put souls in battles so that they may perish. First I measure their strengths, I give them my grace, and then I put them in. And if some souls fall, it is because they do not remain united to me by means of prayer, no longer feeling the sensitivity to my love. They go begging for love from the creatures, while I alone can satiate the human heart. They do not let themselves be guided by the sure path of obedience, believing more in their own judgment than in those who guide them in my place. So, what is the wonder if they fall? Therefore, what I recommend to you is prayer. Even if you should suffer pains of death, you must never neglect that which you are used to doing. Even more, the more you see yourself in the abyss, the more you will invoke the help of the one who can free you. Still more, I want you to place yourself, blindly, in the hands of the confessor, without examining what is being said to you. You will be surrounded by darkness, and will be like one who has no eyes, and who needs a hand to guide her. The eye for you will be the voice of the confessor, which, like light, will clear the darkness from you. The hand will be obedience, which will be your guide and support to make you reach a safe harbor. The last thing I recommend to you is courage. I want you to enter the battle with intrepidity. The thing that an adversary army fears the most is to see courage, strength, and the way in which one challenges the most dangerous fights, without fearing anything. So the demons are, there is nothing they fear more than a courageous soul who, all clinging to me, with a strong spirit, goes into their midst, not to be wounded, but with the firm resolution of wounding them and exterminating them. The demons are frightened, terrified, and would rather flee, but they cannot, because they are bound by my will, and they are forced to stay, to their greater torment. Therefore, do not fear them, for they can do nothing to you without my will. And then, when I see that you can no longer resist and are about to fail, if you are faithful to me, I will come immediately, I will put everyone to flight, and I will give you grace and strength. Courage, then, courage. Now, who can tell the change that occurred in my interior? Everything was horror for me. That love which I felt in me before, I saw now changed into atrocious hate. What pain, not being able to love him. The thought that that Lord who had been so good to me, I was now forced to abhor and curse as if he were the most cruel enemy, tortured my soul. I could not look at him, even through his images, because in looking at them, in holding rosaries in my hands, in kissing them, I had such rushes of hate and such strength, that doing that and reducing everything to pieces was the same. And sometimes I put up such resistance that my nature trembled from head to foot. O God, what a most bitter pain! I believe that if in hell there were no other pains, just the pain of not being able to love God would form the most horrible hell. Many times the devil would place before me the graces that the Lord had given me, now as a crafting of my imagination so that I would make a life more free, more comfortable, and now is true, and they reproached me by saying, "Is this the love he had for you? Is this the recompense, leaving you in our hands? You belong to us, you belong to us, everything is over for you, there is nothing left to hope for." And I felt such rushes of indignation against the Lord, and of desperation being cast into my interior, that many times, if I found myself with some images in my hands, the power of the indignation was such that I would tear them apart. But while doing this, I would cry and kiss it, but I don't know how I was forced to do it. Now, who can tell the torment of my soul? The demons made feast and laughed. Some would make noise from one point, some from another, some would yell and shout, some would deafen me with screams, saying, "See how you belong to us, there is nothing left but taking you to hell, body and soul, and then you will see what we will do to you." Sometimes I felt myself being pulled, now from my clothes, now from the chair on which I was kneeling. They would move it and yell so much that I could not pray. And sometimes the fear was such that, thinking I could free myself, I would go and lay down in bed, since these dins occurred mostly at night, but even there, they would follow me, pulling the pillow and the blankets. Now, who can tell the fright, the fear I felt? I myself did not know where I was, whether on earth or in hell. The fear that they would really take me away was such that I could no longer close my eyes to sleep. I was like one who has a cruel enemy who has sworn to take his life away at any cost, and I believed that this would happen to me as soon as I would close my eyes. Therefore I felt as if someone put something inside of them, in such a way that I was forced to keep them wide open to see when they were going to take me away. Who knows whether I might pluck up the strength to oppose what they wanted to do. I felt my hair stand on end, one by one over my head, and a cold sweat throughout my whole person, which penetrated deep into my bones, and I felt my nerves and bones being dislocated, one by one, wriggling about out of fear. Other times, I felt incited to such temptations of desperation and of suicide, that sometimes, finding myself close to the well or to a knife, I felt drawn to throw myself into it, or to take the knife and kill myself. The effort I had to make in order to run away was so great, that I felt pains of death, and while running away, I felt them come after me, suggesting to me that it was useless for me to live after I had committed so many sins, and that God had abandoned me because I had not been faithful. Even more, I felt as if I had done many wicked things which my soul had never in the world committed, therefore for me there was no more mercy to hope for. In the depth of my soul I felt repeat, "How can you live as an enemy of God? Do you know who that God is, whom you have offended, cursed, hated? Ah! That immense God who surrounded you everywhere, and whom you have dared to offend under his very eyes. Ah! Now that you have lost the God of your soul, who will ever again give you peace? Who will free you from so many enemies?" The pain was such that I did nothing but cry. Sometimes I would start to pray, and I would feel the demons come over me to increase my torment, and some would beat me, some would prick me, some would suffocate my throat. I remember that once, while I was praying, I felt my feet being pulled from underneath the earth, and the earth opened, and flames come out, and I was sinking into it. The fright and the pain were such that I remained half dead, so much so, that in order to make me recover from that state, Jesus Christ came and consoled me. He made me understand that it was not true that I had placed my will to offend him, and that from the most bitter pain I felt, I myself could know that the devil was a liar and that I should not pay attention to him, that for now I had to have patience in suffering those bothers, and that then, peace would come. This would happen from time to time, when I would really come to the extremes, and sometimes in order to put me into more bitter torments. In the act of that comfort the soul would be convinced, because before that light it is impossible for the soul not to learn the truth, but then, when I was in the fight, I would find myself in the same state as before. He also tempted me not to receive communion, persuading me that after I had committed so many sins, it was a boldness to go there, and that if I dared to, not Jesus Christ, but the devil would come, and would give me so many torments as to make me die. However, obedience would win. It is true that sometimes I suffered mortal pains, such that I could hardly recover after communion, but when the confessor absolutely wanted me to receive it, I could not do otherwise. So, I remember that quite a few times I did not receive it. I also remember that sometimes, while I was praying in the evening, they would turn off the lamp. Sometimes they would let out such roars as to strike fear, other times, feeble voices as if they were dying. But who can tell all that they would do? It is impossible. So, this hard trial, though I don't remember too well, lasted for 3 years. However, there were days or weeks of interval. It is not that they would cease completely, but they began to mitigate. I remember that after one communion, the Lord taught me what to do in order to put them to flight, that is, despising them and not bothering about them at all, considering as if they were as many ants. I felt so much strength being infused in me, that I no longer felt that fear of before. So I would act in this way. When they made clamors and noise, I would say to them, "It shows that you have nothing to do, and that in order to spend time you are doing so many silly things. Go ahead, do them, for when you get tired, you will stop it." Sometimes they would stop, other times they would get so angry as to make greater noise. I felt them near me, making themselves stronger and doing violence to themselves in order to take me away. I felt the horrible stench, and the heat of the fire. It is true that I felt a certain shiver in my interior, but I would pluck up courage, and say to them, "Liars that you are, if this were true, you would have done it from the first day, but since it is false, and you have no power over me but that which comes to you from above, go ahead, keep singing, and then, when you are tired, you will croak." If then they emitted laments and shouts, I would say to them, "What is this? You could not add to the accounts today. That is, have some souls been taken away from you, that you lament so much? Poor ones, they don't feel well, but I too want to make you lament a little bit." And I would begin to pray for sinners, or to do acts of reparation. Sometimes I would laugh when they started to do the usual things, and I would say to them, "How can I fear you, cowardly species? If you were serious beings, you would not have done so many silly things. Don't you yourselves feel ashamed? Don't you make fun of yourselves?" If then they tempted me with blasphemies or hatred against God, I would offer him that most bitter pain, that violence I made to myself in seeing that, while the Lord deserved all the love, all the praises, I was forced to do the opposite, in reparation for many who blaspheme against him freely, and who do not even remember that a God exists, whom they are obliged to love and return. If they incited me to desperation, in my interior I would say, "I don't care either about hell or about paradise, what I care about is to love my God. This is not the time to think about anything else, rather, it is the time to love my good God as much as I can. Paradise and hell I place in his hands. He, who is so good, will give me what is best for me, and will give me a place in which I can glorify him more."